Okay, so in this lesson we're going to take a look at these server-side errors, and what it looks like from first glance is we're sending a lot of information back to the client that's requesting the error based on what we see inside here. We've got all sorts of information about where this is coming from. We've got the stack trace, and this is way too much detail to send back to a client, and Postman is our client at the moment. But we're running in development mode, and what we're seeing here is a developer exception. We don't see this in production, and just to prove the point, I'm just going to go to the Solution Explorer inside Properties and Launch Settings.json, and let's just change this from development to production, for example. And I'll just go ahead and restart the API server once again. And once this has restarted, then if we go back to Postman and we send again, then this is all we get when we're running in production. We just get the status code of 500 internal server error and really nothing else. So what we have is developer exceptions and nothing really in production, just the status code of 500. So we'll stick with development to handle the errors for the time being, but we're going to centralize our error handling, and I'll stop the API server and then just restart the API server. So when we do get an exception, and let's go back to our buggy controller, and as I mentioned in the previous lesson, what we would typically do if we knew something that was going to do had the possibility to create an exception, then we would handle the exception, and we would use a try-catch block to do this. So we've got a snippet for try-catch. So I'm just going to take the code that could possibly go wrong and put it inside the try block. And then in the catch, we've got the system exception there. We don't need system there, and I'll just say exception EX. And for this little example, I'm just going to return a status code of 500 and just going to say computer says no as the exception message. So errors are handled at the nearest point where there's an error handler. And when we catch an exception, which we're going to have from the code that we have here, then that's going to be handled by the nearest catch statement that we have. Before we added this try-catch block, in the program class, or what used to be in the program class, was middleware to handle exceptions or handle developer exceptions. But that's been merged into the background now. Microsoft made a big effort to remove any boilerplate from the program class, but there's still such a thing, and what it used to use and what we used to see was this use developer exception page. But this is already applied in the background when we're running in development, and we don't need to see it inside our program class. It's just there. We know it's there because we can see we're getting a different thing when we're in development mode to what we're getting when we're in production mode. So back in the buggy controller, I've now got a locally handled catch block for this exception, so it's not going to make it back, or it's not going to make it up to our developer exception page, so we're going to see the result of this when I run this code again. And if I click send, then we get the computer says no. So we know it's being handled locally. But to do this inside every line of code we write that could potentially have a problem is not my idea of fun. So typically I'd remove that kind of code and go back to not handling errors in each different endpoint or wherever code could go wrong. So we need a more centralized error handling system. And in the next lesson, we'll take a look at how we can create our own middleware so that any exceptions that are generated anywhere in our application can be caught by our middleware, and then we can have a standard error response for both production and development, and we'll take a look at that next.